Hi guys, I'm Michelle. I'm a licensed massage therapist in Washington, and I bring you MBLEx resources, videos here on YouTube to help you be successful at the Massage and Bodywork licensing exam. And also on my website, in the link tree in the description below, I have a huge list of eBooks, courses, practice tests, all to help you to be able to succeed at the MBLEx with calm and confidence. Today we're working on the third video in the skeletal muscle series within the umbrella of the anatomy and physiology series. It's a whole course that I'm creating to put on my website with all the other resources. But as I'm creating each video, I'm just going ahead and posting them. And there's a PDF that goes along with each of these videos that has the slideshow for it so that you can have access to that information when you're not online watching the videos. So in this webinar today, we're going to talk about muscle contractions. The last two videos were just a quick overview of the skeletal muscle system, and then I talked about the anatomy of the muscle system. We're going to be carrying that information from the anatomy of the muscle system into how the contractions work. So make sure and check out that video on the anatomy first so that you can understand what I'm talking about when I'm discussing these very microscopic actions that are happening. If you haven't already seen that video and you already have a pretty good idea of how the anatomy of skeletal muscle works, then feel free to just go ahead and watch, or just listen and watch and just absorb the information. You can go to the anatomy thing later, but it really helps. So we're going to be talking about the sliding filament mechanism. We're going to be talking about the motor unit. That's where the brain tells the muscle what to do. And then we're going to talk about how ATP is created through the three different pathways: creatine, anaerobic, and aerobic metabolism. And then at the very end, we're going to practice what we learned with some MBLEx style questions. So if all that sounds like it's going to work for you, make sure and stay tuned for this video. But first, I wanted to make sure that you understood that in this skeletal muscle series, I'm not going to be talking about pathologies of the musculoskeletal system. For that, you're going to need to check out my pathology series that's available on my website in the link tree in the description below. You can just click on that and go to it. Also, I have a musculoskeletal pathologies video that's here on YouTube that you can check out. And also individual muscles, their actions, their origins and insertions. I have a complete series, a course that's on my website, and so you can check that out as well. So all those links are going to be in the link tree in the description, and also I'm going to have the link for all of those in the pinned comment as well. So be sure to check all of that out so that you can have a very comprehensive education and preparation for your MBLEx. So now I do want to make sure that you understand as I'm going along that there is so much more to the mechanism of the nervous system sending an impulse and the muscles contracting. And also for the ATP production, there's a long line of chemical reactions that happen. I had to learn them for pre-med, and I'd forgotten a lot of them. And then when I got into, I'd forgotten how all of it worked, but I knew there was a lot to it. And then when I got into my massage therapy education, the instructor was like doing a brief overview, and I was like, there's more to this. I know there's more for me to understand. I can't remember it if I don't understand it completely. And he was like, there really isn't any more that you need to know in order to be a massage therapist. Just keep it simple. And that's what I want to tell you guys right now. Any of you who know that there's more to the mechanism, that there's more to the chemical reactions to produce ATP, that's great. But you don't need to memorize all of it in order to pass the MBLEx, okay? So what I'm going to tell you is all you need to know for the MBLEx. So don't overcomplicate it, and memorize it if you need to. Even if you don't fully understand it, just memorize these are the facts that I need to know out of it, and I'm going to present them to you. Here we go. Let's get started. So every movement you make, whether lifting a client's arm during a session or taking a deep breath between appointments depends on the elegant mechanics of muscle contraction. Inside each muscle fiber, actin and myosin filaments slide past each other, fueled by the body's energy molecule, ATP. Muscles generate this ATP through three main systems: the rapid creatine phosphate pathway, the short-term anaerobic glycolysis, and the long-term aerobic respiration process. And this is important for massage therapists because it helps therapists appreciate how muscles perform, tire, and recover, knowledge that directly informs effective restorative body work. Okay, so a quick overview of the sliding filament mechanism. Looks like some of this got cut off. Sorry about that. The very last line got cut off, but this list, it breaks down everything, including the details that you're going to need to know. But let's just start with a big umbrella. And I want to say that the brain sends the signal to your muscles, and those actin and myosin filaments squish together. And then when the signal stops, the actin and myosin filaments relax and go apart. And it happens on a scale of thousands and thousands per muscle fiber, okay? So it's like all these teeny tiny little things are squishing together and then relaxing when the signal stops. The signal comes in, they contract, the signal stops, they relax. That's the basis of it. But now what I want to do from that point is present the jargon, the terminology that you're going to need to know in order to be able to answer the questions on the MBLEx when they come to you, because it's going to be presented with the terminology. So in order for you, like you might theoretically in your head understand the process. If you don't have the language, it might make it challenging for you to pass the questions. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. So we're going to start with the motor unit, which is the motor neuron and the multiple fibers that it innervates. So here is, let's say this is a bundle of fibers, and around each of the fibers is going to be the endomysium, okay? So sticking to the endomysium, we have a motor neuron. So that, and we know that a neuron stretches all the way up to our spinal cord. So that motor neuron is either going to be activated by a reflex or by a voluntary movement, a voluntary instruction, like go pick up that cup of coffee. Ooh, good idea. Nice. So I just sent a message down my motor neuron to my hand, which innervated a bundle of fibers, okay? So there's a muscle fiber bundle. And at the place where the motor neuron connects, it's called the neuromuscular junction, okay? So those are some definitions there. Specialized neuron just for stimulating muscles is a motor neuron. We have lots of neurons, but a motor neuron is just for stimulating the muscles. The neurotransmitter is the chemical that the nervous system sends down that motor neuron to stimulate the muscles to contract. Specifically, that neurotransmitter is called acetylcholine. You may or may not be questioned on that. Probably not. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about two things that I don't have demonstrated here, but I just want you to know these two terms and how they work together. Threshold stimulus is the minimum amount of stimulating chemicals required to make a reaction happen in the muscle fibers. So you have a little bit of chemicals coming down. Nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to happen until you have so many chemicals flooding in that it triggers it to start. Now let's say this motor neuron is bundled around 364 muscle fibers. When that threshold stimulus is reached, all 364 fibers are going to contract. So there are different size bundles throughout your body for different functions. So this is what they call the all or none response. So a motor neuron triggers the whole bundle that it is responsible for. All of them will fire. But like if you want to control the amount of pressure, like you're the Incredible Hulk and you're trying to pick up your cup of coffee and you just end up smashing your coffee, it's because too many of these motor neurons are firing, okay? But if you only want some of them to fire, that's what your brain is going to do. It will say, okay, I only want the bundles that have 10 fibers each. Like you're going to pick up a pencil. There are some bundles that are only 10, and then there are some bundles that are, hundreds. Like, for example, in your quads when you need to run, okay? So that's how there is a specific control over the firing of each muscle, okay? Hope that sunk in. You can watch this video again to help you remember it. Okay, so like I said, the motor neuron stimulus is reached, the message to move comes. That's what it means. Get going. The threshold stimulus is reached. The motor end plate gets the message. So let's say this is where the neuron is, okay? And that's this is the neuromuscular junction altogether, is where the neuron meets the muscle fiber. The muscle fiber starts getting the sprinkling of acetylcholine coming in, and this part right here where it meets is called the motor end plate. It's the place on the muscle fiber where the neurotransmitters tell it what to do. So these acetylcholine sprinkles come in, and the message goes to the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release calcium ions into the cell plasma. Whoa! What does that mean? I'm going to show you, okay? Now remember in the last video, we talked about myofibrils. This is a demonstration of what a myofibril looks like. It's one of the many fibers inside of each muscle fiber. So remember we had a bundle of myofibrils inside of every muscle cell. And each of those has stacks and stacks of these contractile units called sarcomeres. But bundled around every myofibril is a network called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and that's where the calcium ions get stored. So, okay, not yet. So the message comes into the motor end plate on the muscle fiber. And so the muscle fiber is holding all those sarcoplasmic reticulums that are going to start flooding the whole myofibril with calcium, okay? So calcium sparkles start going all up in here when the message comes. So while the message is happening, the calcium is coming in. Okay, so here's the cycle of what it looks like. I have it listed, what happens, right? We have ATP that's happening. We have calcium that's happening. I'm gonna go step by step. So the message comes in, calcium ions start pouring in from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. All these sparkles are the calciums. So the calcium sticks to the actin. This is the actin fiber here, actin filament, and this is a myosin head. So the calcium sticks to these little dots where the attractive point is, and it basically uncovers the attractive point and creates a reaction that sucks the myosin head up, okay? The myosin's like, woo, electrically charged, electrically attracted to this little spot on the actin fiber. And so the myosin is like, ooh, I got you, and I'm gonna pull you up. Ooh, I got you, I'm gonna pull you up, okay? So it grabs that spot and pulls it forward, and then ATP comes in and snaps them apart, but the actin filament has already slid over, so there's the spot where it slid, and it's already slid over, and then it goes shoop, and it attracts again. And so I like to liken this to a zip tie. Those are like the little ties, the plastic ties that you put around your like electrical cords and stuff to keep them bundled together so you don't have a big mess. When you go to put the plastic piece into its head part, it goes snap, 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 snap. That's exactly how the myosin head works. But it just needs ATP to disconnect it so it can go on to the next open spot on the actin filament, okay? Go to the next, go into the next, go into the next. So this is all happening when the impulse to have the calcium is happening. But when the impulse stops, when the impulse stops, the calcium gets pulled back in to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And the place where, so the calcium had been bound to, they call it tropomyosin. It's a protein that covers up all these little red dots, okay? That protein goes and covers it up again, covers up those red dots again. And so the myosin is not attracted to it, and so it relaxes. The whole muscle relaxes, okay? So the calcium ions go back home to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and then the sarcomere relaxes because the myosin is not attracted to the actin anymore. Okay, that was it. Now you can go through and watch this part of the video again and again. I would have needed that when I was a massage student and preparing for the MBLEx. Now, you should remember that the whole section of anatomy and physiology counts for 11% of the MBLEx, and kinesiology counts for 12, and this mechanism is in both of those, but it's just a small fraction of what the MBLEx is. So if you don't have this completely dialed in, memorized, and know exactly how it works, you probably will still pass as long as you know everything else, okay? You're gonna be okay. But just having an overview of some of the terminology will help quite a bit. So just watch this video like 5 times to help you to dial in the mechanism. But we're gonna move on here for everybody else's sake to talk about energy production to create that ATP that helps to break apart the myosin heads from the actin filament. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, tri meaning 3. So we have 3 phosphates here in the chemical composition, and then we have adenosine, which is this molecular composition, okay? So in order to create energy, we pop one of those off, and it becomes ADP, which is diphosphate, what's left after the reaction that pops off the extra phosphate, okay? When that extra phosphate is popped off, ADP is going around looking for another phosphate to be whole again, okay? So it's just, our body is a constant balance between ADP and ATP, okay? Breaking it off, getting it back, breaking it off, getting it back. Every time it gets broken off, it generates energy for us. And we need a lot of those in order to be able to keep our body functioning and do the things we need to do. Okay, so going back to the first mode of energy production, which is the least efficient, and that's direct phosphorylation, otherwise known as the creatine phosphate system. So that's the fastest, easiest thing. The fastest, easiest thing, but also the least efficient. So we have all of these extra phosphates that get stored in the cell, and they're attached to the creatine, which lives in there. So when the muscle is resting, we have so many ATPs that our body breaks those down into creatine, and then there's ADPs that are just floating around, okay? The muscle needs to work. We need lots of energy, so the body rips the phosphate off the creatine and adds it to the 2 adenosine, or the 2 phosphates on the adenosine, and it creates an ATP. So that's direct phosphorylation, and that will create a very short burst of energy. That's 15 seconds. If your baby's about to jump into the road, you can just like jump out and grab that baby, okay? So the next gear, second gear, is anaerobic metabolism. Anaerobic means no oxygen is present. It's also known as glycolysis, and it's the first of 2 steps in energy production, but by itself, it will create 2 ATPs. Direct phosphorylation creates 1 ATP, and you get 2 ATPs from glycolysis. So we have sugar that's hanging out in our body. And in the storage form, it's called glycogen. So in fat, it's called glycogen, and it can be converted into glucose very easily. And when it gets broken in half, we get 2 ATPs. There is a whole chemical reaction that happens that I skipped, but you don't need to know that in order to pass the MBLEx. All you need to know is glucose gets broken in half and 2 ATPs come off. And we call that glycolysis. And it's a short burst of energy, 30 to 40 seconds. And then the leftovers is pyruvate, which can create lactic acid. Used to be associated with muscle pain after exertion, but scientists are thinking that's not the case so much anymore, that instead that pain afterward is probably caused by tiny microscopic tears that happen in a short burst of energy, whatever you're doing, you know. Lactic acid can, but it can inhibit the contractile process, but it doesn't create the pain. So yeah, this is all without oxygen, okay? So when you have your pyruvic acid left over, that gets taken to the next type of energy production. So yeah, your first burst of energy, when you see the bear and you're like, holy moly, I need to run, your legs get kicking into action thanks to glycolysis and anaerobic metabolism. However, if that bear just won't let up, and you don't have anybody behind you for the bear to catch, and you need to keep running, then you're gonna need aerobic metabolism, also known as the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle. So here you've got your pyruvic acid left over from the first burst of energy where you got your 2 ATPs. When you're breathing heavy, that means there's a lot of oxygen available. There's this whole cycle that the body goes through that you don't need to know. But when oxygen is present, it takes that pyruvic acid and turns it into all these ATPs, and it also generates carbon dioxide, water, and heat, okay? And it's the most efficient form of energy production. So you know, for the Krebs or citric acid cycle, this is all you need to know, okay? Pyruvic acid plus oxygen equals 30 to 32 ATPs being created. So that's from one glucose molecule, okay? So that's the most efficient. That's your highest gear, okay? I think that's it. Yeah, that's it that you need to know for that, okay? So go through and watch this video again and again to help you to remember these things. It's not complicated, actually. It's just a matter of remembering the terminology. So that's why you need to listen to this again and again, so it becomes familiar to you. All right, so let's do some practice questions to help dial in that information. During the sliding filament mechanism of muscle contraction, what is the primary role of the myosin filament? Okay, myosin is the one in the center with the sticky outy head, okay? A, myosin provides the binding sites for calcium to attach and expose the actin? No, that's not true. So actin has the binding site. The calcium picks up the tropomyosin and pulls it off of the binding site. So that's not true. B, myosin slides inward along the actin to shorten the muscle fiber. I think the actin slides inward on the myosin. Let's read the other options. C, myosin heads attach to the actin and pull the thin filaments toward the center of the sarcomere. That's the one. That's the one we're looking for. D, myosin releases acetylcholine to signal the muscle fiber to contract. Not true. The acetylcholine is released by the motor units. Okay, so C is correct. In the sliding filament mechanism, myosin, which is the thick filament, uses ATP to form cross bridges with actin. When myosin heads pivot, they pull the filaments inward, shortening the sarcomeres and producing the muscle contraction. Okay, next question. During the sliding filament mechanism, what is the main difference between the sarcoplasm and the sarcoplasmic reticulum in a muscle fiber? Okay, so we're looking for the true statement about the main difference between the sarcoplasm and the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So we're gonna learn here about what the difference is between the sarcoplasm and the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, remember the sarcoplasm is the liquid that everything is suspended in, and the sarcoplasmic reticulum is the network that stores the calcium. All right, so let's look for the statement that jives with that. So A, the sarcoplasm stores calcium ions for contraction, true, while the I'm already confusing it. Sarcoplasmic reticulum stores the calcium. So A can't be true because the sarcoplasm is the suspension liquid, okay? So B, the sarcoplasm is the muscle cell's cytoplasm. That's the suspension liquid where organelles and myofibrils are suspended, while the sarcoplasmic reticulum stores and releases calcium needed for contraction. That's what we're looking for there. Then I'm just going to look at these two to make sure that there's nothing better. The sarcoplasm forms the outer membranes of the muscle fiber. That's not true. The sarcoplasmic reticulum produces ATP. Not true. Our mitochondria produce ATP. And D, the sarcoplasm and sarcoplasmic reticulum are identical structures that both transmit electrical impulses. Not true. Okay? So yeah, B, the sarcoplasm the true answer is, the sarcoplasm is the muscle cell cytoplasm, where organelles and myofibrils are suspended, while sarcoplasmic reticulum stores and releases calcium needed for contraction. So explanation here, the sarcoplasm is the fluid environment inside the cell, similar to cytoplasm, while the sarcoplasmic reticulum, SR, is a specialized network that surrounds myofibrils and releases calcium ions, the trigger for the actin-myosin interaction during contraction. Yay! Okay, next question. Which statement best describes the all or none response of a motor unit in skeletal muscle? What is the all or none response? Now, we're looking for the best description, which is we're looking for the true statement about this all or none response. The all or none response is that when a threshold stimulus is reached from the motor neuron, it makes all the muscles in that bundle fire. Not only some of them, all of them, okay? So our options are A, once a muscle fiber is partially stimulated, it contracts halfway to conserve energy. Nope. B, if a motor unit receives a stimulus at or above the threshold, all of its muscle fibers contract completely. If the stimulus is below threshold, none contract. That is a true statement. Then we have C, a stronger nerve impulse makes each muscle fiber contract with more force than a weaker one. That's not the one. And then D, only half the muscle fibers in a motor unit respond to each nerve impulse to prevent fatigue. So there is nothing to prevent fatigue in the all or none response. So that would be B, if a motor unit receives a stimulus at or above the threshold, all of its muscle fibers contract completely. If the stimulus is below threshold, none contract, okay? Stronger overall contractions occur by recruiting additional motor units, not by partially contracting fibers. Next question. Which of the following correctly lists the energy systems muscles use during contraction in the order they are recruited, along with how much ATP they produce? Woo! Okay, so what are we looking for? Energy systems muscles use in the order they are recruited. So remember, we have the least efficient to the medium efficient to the most efficient, right? So first gear, second gear, third gear, and how much ATP they produce. Okay, so remember, the first one produces 1 ATP, the second one produces 2 ATP, and the third one produces 30 to 32 ATP. Very efficient with the last one. So let's look at our options for the correct answer. A, aerobic respiration to glycolysis to direct phosphorylation, all produce equal amounts? That's not true. Remember, the first one, the least efficient, is direct phosphorylation. So we need to start with that. Glycolysis would be in the middle, and glycolysis feeds into aerobic metabolism, or respiration is another term for it. Okay, so direct phosphorylation provides a few seconds of quick energy. Anaerobic glycolysis produces a moderate amount of ATP for short activity, and aerobic respiration produces the most ATP for sustained activity. I like B. That's a pretty good one. So glycolysis to aerobic to direct phosphorylation, that's the wrong order. Glycolysis produces the most. No. Glycolysis produces the medium amount, which is only 2. So direct phosphorylation is the first one, true. Aerobic respiration occur only when oxygen is absent. No, aerobic needs oxygen, providing limited ATP. So just a reminder about aerobic respiration, instead of the terminology being metabolism, they do mean the same thing, just to let you know. I had to, little flies buzzing around me, driving me crazy. Okay, so the answer would be direct phosphorylation to glycolysis, anaerobic glycolysis, and then they add oxygen for aerobic metabolism, also known as the citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle, for the most sustained activity. 15 seconds to, this is 1 to 2 minutes, but it could be like 30 to 45 seconds. I've seen different amounts, but very short amount. And then the high yield ATP production for aerobic exercise, when you need to run for a long time, would be coming from the citric acid cycle. And so this completes this video for today. And yeah, make sure and watch this video over and over again if you need to help dial in that terminology for muscle contraction mechanism and for our energy production. And so make sure and check out the next video, which is coming up, and that's where I talk about some basics in kinesiology. It's like everything else under the umbrella of anatomy and physiology that you need to know. And I will see you in that next video. Toodaloo.